Esteemed attendees of the RingPartner hosted webinar, thank you. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful, well, it's very rainy here up in Victoria, BC, but regardless, we'll say online it's a beautiful day. RingPartner is thrilled that we have the Director of Content and Communications at LogMyCalls joining us today, McKay Allen. McKay?
Henry, thanks. We appreciate it. Thanks for having us. We've done a couple of these webinars with RingPartner. They're a great partner of ours and great company. Everybody I've met with the company's great. So thanks for having us, Henry. We really appreciate it. Henry, Henry's up in BC.
Not a problem.
Is that right? You're up in BC, Henry?
Yep, we're up in Victoria, BC, and in case people are confused as to why they're not hearing the angelic voice of one Mike Williams, he is out sick, unfortunately. And of all days, McKay, it's picture day at RingPartner. So I've brought in a small blonde wig, so I'm going to pretend to be Mike for not only this webinar, but also for the company photos. So it's a bit of an awkward time for him to fall ill, but we soldier on.
awkward or fortuitous, depending on how you look at it.
Oh, fortuitous for some, yes. Anyway, thanks very much for joining us, McKay. Why don't we head right into it?
Awesome. Well, thanks for having us. Appreciate it. The topic of today's webinar, the title is the 6 craziest metrics we extracted from millions of calls. I'll explain who I am and who LogMyCalls is in a moment. First, about me. As I said, my name is McKay Allen. I'm the Director of Content and Communications at LogMyCalls. In a previous life, I was a news anchor. I worked at various TV stations in the western United States, in Salt Lake City, as well as in Spokane, Washington. Interviewed some interesting folks and seen some really interesting things. But I have been, for the last 3.5, 4 years, a marketer. I've spoken at shows like Social Media Strategy Summit, SES, SMX, and LeadsCon. I'm a contributor to today's tire industry and other tire pubs and various verticals. And then I've written a lot in the affiliate space for LeadsCon.com and have appeared on Perform Insider and other publications. I'm also a college football fan, which is important if you're in the U.S. This time of year. So glad to be here. So first thing I want to do is actually sort of unleash a poll so you can see very clearly, maybe I can get a better understanding sort of who you think we are if you're familiar with us. So I'm going to launch this poll. Why don't you go ahead and answer the question here. How familiar are you with LogMyCalls? You're a customer, you've thought about using us, you've heard of us, but that's about it, or you have no idea who we are, which is just fine if you have no idea who we are. So we'll leave that open just for a second here and allow you folks to answer the question, and then we'll proceed. So it looks like about half of you voted. Let's get up to 70 or 80%, and then we'll close the poll. I think polls are good because they help us to be interactive. So I'll explain who we are as soon as this is over, and then I'll have you explain who you are, which will be fun. Okay, let's close it up. About 75% of you have voted. And we'll show you the results. So we have about 13% of you say you're customers. I recognize you on this call, so thank you for being customers. 9% of you say you've thought about using the tool. 43% say you've heard of us, but that's about it. 35% say I have no earthly clue who you people are or why I should care. So let me explain who we are and why you should care briefly. So about LogMyCalls. We provide call tracking, call recording, and conversation analytics. So call tracking, if you're on this phone call today about phone calls, you probably know what call tracking is. We can tell you which ads, campaigns, and keywords generated phone calls and which didn't, helping you better determine the campaigns that you need to optimize and those that are doing well, and then also helping you track, of course, which affiliates are producing calls for you. We also provide call recording, and then the thing that makes us unique is we provide a tool called Conversation Analytics, which basically analyzes the phone call itself. So it actually listens to the phone call for words and phrases that may actually help determine what happened on the call. So we can tell you if the caller was a good lead or a bad lead. We can tell you if the caller resulted in an appointment or a sale or a reservation or whatever your conversion action is on the call. We can even tell you if the person who answered the call did a good job selling. And it's a really neat tool, a great way to get data from phone calls, which has been lacking for a long, long time in the industry. Now, I want to learn a little bit about you before we move on. So in the question bar, everybody, why don't you type in where you're calling in from today. Maybe give us the city, state, or province that you're calling in from today. Just curious where everyone is. As Henry said, they're up in Victoria, BC. I'm in Utah. Our headquarters are in Salt Lake City. So I'm curious where you all are calling in from today. So we have New Jersey, we've got Florida, we've got Connecticut, we've got a few Californias, Michigan, Pennsylvania, some more from BC, we've got Ontario, we've got New York, we've got the Netherlands, fantastic. Costa Rica, Toronto, they say they have t-shirt weather today, Jamie, that's fantastic. Oregon, Boston, so we're all over the place. Thank you very much for calling in, everybody, today. Hopefully this will be worth your time. Now, let's go through today's agenda. We're going to talk, first of all, about the importance of phone calls. Second, we're going to talk about conversation analysis, how it works, which is sort of the method for this data. Then we're going to get into the 6 craziest metrics we extracted from calls, and then just a couple of brief use cases. So, first of all, again, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. So part 1, the importance of phone calls. In 2013, businesses spent about $73 billion with a B American U.S. dollars to generate phone calls. That's a huge number. That's according to BIA Kelsey. In other words, they spent this money on marketing, and their sole focus was to generate phone calls. That's a massive number, and that number's gone up dramatically since about 2010 when smartphones and smartphone search really started to take over. And that number, according to BIA Kelsey and Google, will continue to go up. So we expect that to be over $100 billion here, if not in 14, at least in 15. So long story short, you're not the only businesses or marketers that are spending money to drive phone calls. Pretty much everybody's starting to do that, which is a good thing, means good things for RingPartner and for LogMyCalls. 90% of customer conversations still take place on the phone. I think that's a really interesting piece of data. You think that with the online environment today and all the methods we have to communicate with businesses, conversations, two-way conversations still take place over the phone. According to Google, 30 billion calls will be made to businesses this year in the U.S. from mobile search. Mobile search is a huge driver of all this, as you know. We'll talk about that more in a moment. 64% of local businesses say calls are the best leads they receive. And, of course, we know about call tracking, right? As I said, you can put unique local and or toll-free numbers on your landing pages and your mobile ads and your AdWords campaigns, and you can actually generate calls with those numbers, and then you can log into a tool like LogMyCalls and figure out where those calls came from. So how many phone calls did your specific AdWords group, keyword group generate versus group 2? How many phone calls came from mobile versus standard desktop advertising? So long story short, it's a way for you to track what's happening with your money that you're spending on marketing. Critically important stuff. As I said, which sources, channels, campaigns, and keywords generate phone calls and which don't. So we have some clients who generate the majority of calls from their organic search campaigns. So they generate calls that are SEO focused, driven by organic traffic. We have some that generate actually quite a few calls from display networks, a lot from mobile, a lot from AdWords, and then we have some that still generate calls the old-fashioned way. They send out direct mail pieces or even coupons, and they get a lot of calls from those sources. Keep in mind, too, you can actually affix certain call tracking numbers to certain affiliates, and you can actually determine which affiliates are producing calls if you're in the performance marketing space. So mobile searchers want to call you. Nearly 70% of mobile local searches result in phone calls, according to Google. So if someone's searching for something in their local area on their smartphone, they're going to make a phone call. That's just what's going to happen. You can see this also from Google. This is dependent on the industry, the percentage that would be likely to call if the capability was available easily. So that means a number that is tappable, either on a landing page or in the ad itself. So you have, obviously, in local services, as I said, nearly 70% down to restaurants and retail, which is still a large percentage, right? It's just becoming more common, ironically, to make a phone call. It used to be, and it's kind of switched, right? I remember being a kid, and when we were traveling, my dad would call the airline and call the hotels when we were traveling, and he'd get a bunch of quotes on his yellow notepad after talking to the person, and then he'd call back and make a reservation. Well, in the 2000s, that obviously has changed. People have started to get online to book pretty much everything related to travel specifically. The funny thing is it's starting to switch back, new data shows, specifically in that industry. As an example, just last night, for example, I booked a hotel room, and it was actually easier for me just to tap the number and do it over the phone than it was to go through the process online. It was simpler. And that's the big change with phone calls, is because of mobile search, making a phone call is now simpler than filling out several online forms. It's much easier, which is ironic because that was the allure of online forms for 15 years. Now it's very much swinging back the other direction. So, and this is ironic, and I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here if you're on a RingPartner and LogMyCalls webinar, but far too few businesses attempt to drive phone calls. Instead, they prefer form fills. Our experience is that that's probably not wise, because even though your business may get fewer phone calls than form fills, or even though your affiliate network, for example, may get fewer phone calls than form fills, phone calls are more valuable. They're significantly more valuable. And here's why. Callers are 10 times more likely to turn into customers than form fills. Now, this comes from two pieces of data that we kind of slammed together into one. The first piece is from Marketing Sherpa and HubSpot that both say about 2 to 3% of form fills end up turning into customers in the next 6 months. So if you have a bunch of forms on your site, 2 to 3% of those people are going to end up turning into customers in the next 6 months. That's not a very high percentage. It means 98% aren't. Now, on the other hand, about 29% of the people who call you will end up turning into customers. We'll talk about that data more in a second. So long story short, callers are 10 times more likely to turn into customers than are form fills. Part 2, let's talk about conversation analytics and analysis and how we got this data. Our thesis is that there is valuable gold buried inside of every single phone conversation. Traditionally, marketers have been able to figure out the source of the phone call, right? So you're able to say, okay, that call came from AdWords. That call came from this affiliate. That call came from mobile. That call came from this ad. That's great, but the industry has been entirely blind to what actually happens on the phone call. So once the phone call rings, traditional call tracking stopped, right? But the ironic thing about that is really valuable stuff happens on the phone. Really valuable stuff, probably the most valuable stuff, happens on the phone. So we figured, if there's a way to get data out of those calls, to mine that data out, could we do it? And we developed a system that can, and that's where we got this data from that I'll share with you today. And I don't share this with you as a sales pitch, but just to tell you, hey, here's how we got this data. Conversation analytics, how does it work? First of all, it analyzes phone calls with a speech recognition engine, upon which is layered hundreds of thousands of proprietary algorithms. So basically, these algorithms take the speech recognition text of the call on both sides, the caller and the employee, and rip it apart, and try to find words and phrases that will tell our system what happened on the call. It also determines things like volume and rate of speech. It also analyzes elements like certain words spoken together in a certain way. So using all this, we're able to determine what happened on the call. Was the caller a good lead or a bad lead? Did they result in revenue for the business or not? Did the person who answered the phone sell effectively or didn't they? Here's an example of how it works. Conversation analytics, you can see the words this gentleman is saying. This happy man named Jack is sitting at his desk. He's trying to get car insurance. The words that he says on the call are going into our conversation analyzer, where we rip it apart and we pull out data. Like, what was the phone etiquette of the person answering the phone, the agent? Was there a missed opportunity for an upsell? What was the lead score of the caller? Did the person determine needs of the caller? Was the caller polite? Did the caller ask a lot of questions? Were they confused? So there's so many things we can pull out of calls, literally like 50 different things that we've developed so far that we can extract from phone calls in near real time. So just another visual representation as to how it works. This is how our dashboard, one of the pages in our dashboard, looks. You can see how it's displayed. Now that you understand how it works and how we got this data, let me explain to you how we specifically, this data set we're going to talk about today. So what we did is in the first 6 months of 2014, we analyzed millions of phone calls. These are across our entire client base and across various industries. So we have some phone calls in the mortgage space. We have some phone calls in the home services space, in the financial space, in the auto repair space, in the auto dealer space, in the tire world, in affiliate marketing. So these are across every one of our industries and verticals, but it's millions of phone calls. And so what we wanted to see across these millions of phone calls is what happened on the phone. Quite simply, what happened on the phone? First thing we tracked was conversion rate. What was the conversion rate of phone calls? You can see here, conversation analytics can determine, based on the words and phrases said on the call, whether or not a call resulted in a conversion, which could be one of four things. An appointment being set. So if you're a dentist or if you're in the tire industry, an appointment being set is what you want. Reservation made. That could be an equipment rental reservation or a car reservation or hotel reservation. An intended purchase. That's usually in bigger ticket items like an auto dealership. Or in technology, someone will call us and say, yes, send us the contract. Well, those words would trigger an intended purchase for our system. And then finally, an actual purchase. So was payment information actually shared over the phone, credit card information. And what we found after analyzing millions of phone calls is that 29% of them resulted in a conversion. So that means of all the calls that our clients received through their across their industries, 29% of them resulted in a sale, an intended sale, a reservation, or an appointment, a conversion. So you can, again, track conversion rate by campaign, by source, or by affiliate. So we have clients that are using this to say, okay, I want to figure out, I'm running 15 different AdWords campaigns, and I want to figure out which specific ad copy produces the most conversions. So you can actually use our system to determine which campaigns, ads, keyword groups produce the highest conversion rate. You can use it to determine which agents in a call center or in a location have the highest conversion rate. You can even use it to determine which affiliates have the highest conversion rates. So suddenly you're able to not just track, okay, this number of phone calls came from this source, but these conversions came from this source. That's an incredibly valuable marketing metric, like critically valuable. And we can determine all this in near real time automatically. Second is lead score. So we're all familiar with marketing automation tools like HubSpot or Marketo that provide a lead score to a lead on a 0 to 100 scale. So a good lead maybe clicks on a couple emails and downloads a white paper. They get 15 points for each one of those actions. Our lead scoring system for phone calls works in precisely the same way. If they indicate that they're interested, they get a few points. If they ask good questions, they get a few points. If they are the decision maker, they get a few points. If they're not terribly price sensitive, they get a few points. So what we did is across Q1 and Q2 and across our entire client phone call base, we analyzed millions of those phone calls, and what we found was that in Q1 and Q2, about 21% of the calls that we analyzed were great leads. Great leads. So those are leads between 80 and 100. 28% of the calls we analyzed were good leads. Those are between 60 and 79 on the lead score scale. So now, again, suddenly you're able to judge campaigns, keyword groups, ads, affiliates, anything you want, based on not just the number of phone calls, but on the quality of phone calls. So you might have an affiliate that's producing, only 100 calls in a given month. But if all those calls are over 80 in a lead score, as a lead buyer, you're going to buy those leads, and you're going to pay a lot for them. We have some clients in the higher ed space. They're willing to pay a lot of money for phone calls, a lot of money for phone calls. Well, guess what? Now that we're able to show them which phone calls are really good leads, they're willing to pay the people that are generating those calls for them a lot more for those phone calls. So the possibilities here are endless in terms of use cases, right? If you're a regular SEO agency, you can actually charge your clients for really good phone calls. I mean, we're talking, the possibilities here are truly endless. Here's an example of how this could work in just a very basic marketing sense. So we're going to play a game of pick the campaign. Campaign A is a mobile click-to-call campaign. $1,257 were spent. There were 251 phone calls generated. The cost per phone call is about $5 with this campaign. In campaign B, which is a standard AdWords campaign, there was $1,500 spent, so more money, but fewer phone calls, 117. So call tracking is going to show us which campaign has a better ROI. It's obvious here, right? One has a cost per call of $5, one has a cost per call of $12. Well, I'm going to spend money on campaign A all day long over campaign B. However, if you look at the rest of the story with lead scoring, you can clearly see that that would have been a stupid decision. Why? Because with campaign A, the average lead score of those calls was 63. The conversion rate was 21%. And so of those calls, only 47 converted, which means your cost per acquisition was $27. For campaign B, the average lead score was 91. The conversion rate was 63%, which means 73 calls converted, significantly higher. So your cost per acquisition is only $20. So suddenly, having this data totally flipped the ROI calculations you've been using on its head. And we see this all the time with our clients. Number 3, missed opportunities. If you tune out for every piece of data that we've shared so far, please pay attention to this one because it may be the most critical one you see. So what we found in Q1 was that 49% of the calls we analyzed, Q1 and Q2 rather, was that 49% of the calls we analyzed were sales inquiries. Meaning these were people that were really interested in buying something. They weren't just calling to find directions or ask a question about a service item or a product. They wanted to buy, 49%. Of those, 56% of the calls we analyzed in Q1 and Q2 were missed opportunities, meaning the person on the phone did a very poor job at trying to sell them on the product or service effectively. So you might be generating really good calls all day long, but if the person answering the phone sucks, that's not going to help the business very much. 56% of those sales inquiries were missed opportunities. So these are people, let's use a very basic example. Someone calls up to a tire shop wanting new tires. They ask, we've all done this. We call up a tire shop, we want new tires. And by want, I mean need. Nobody really wants new tires. They need them because their car is going to slide off the road into a snowbank. So you call the tire place. They say, what size do you need? They tell you the prices they have on tires, low end, medium, and high end. Generally, those phone calls then end right there. That's a missed opportunity because this is a caller that wanted and needed new tires, and yet they did not buy. So how can this be used? Well, here's a very basic example. You can see which deals are being lost and by whom and why. Here's a case study. Sorry. So we have a client we're working with right now that in a period of about 2 weeks had 200 missed opportunities. So these are good leads that didn't buy. So what did we do? Our system can automatically send those missed opportunities to the client. So they see them, they see their phone numbers, they can call them back. Since then, 16% of those missed opportunities have been turned into new accounts and revenue for that client. So these are people that hung up the phone without buying something, but because our system realized they were missed opportunities, they're able to call them back and get actual revenue. So suddenly this tool is paid for itself if you only did this. That's pretty cool. And we have clients doing that today. Now, why are a lot of opportunities missed? Now, there can be a couple reasons. Sometimes people who call are dumb, right? We've all experienced that. Someone calls and they just don't understand. They're not smart people. That's a possibility. Or they're very price sensitive. Or maybe they're not the person that is the decision maker and they thought they maybe were until they saw the price point or something. But the other reason, and the most common reason that missed opportunities happen, is a simple sales skill that our system extracts from phone calls. Did the person answering the phone, did the agent ask the caller to become a customer? Did they ask for the business directly? If the answer to that is yes, calls convert 10.4 times more than if the answer is no. So if the agent simply says, hey, why don't we have an opening at 2, can we get you set up? Or why don't we go ahead and book that for you? Or why don't we go ahead and start your trial? Something like that, if the agent does that, the caller is 10.4 times more likely to convert than if the agent simply answers questions and lets the person hang up. Now here's the really disturbing thing, is that of all the calls we analyzed in Q1 and Q2, 11% of them, 11% ask for the business. That means 89% of the time they're not doing this thing that would make the sale 10.4 times more likely. That's craziness. Do that one thing. Just ask for the business. So number 5, this is a different sort of type of piece of data. So the other 4, previous 4, we talked about, okay, across all the calls we analyzed, how frequently did this thing happen? This is a little different. What we did is we wanted to see across our system what impact certain factors had on conversions. So for example, what impact does sales skills of the agent have on conversions? So what our system does is it grades every single call. It grades the sales skills on that call from 0 to 100. 0 means the person on the phone was really not a very good salesperson. 100 means they were extremely good. And we do this based, again, on the words and phrases said on the call. So what we wanted to figure out is what is the conversion rate depending on the sales skill. So you can see here on the left that gradations from 0 to 100. So what this is showing is when the sales skills were between 90 and 100 on a call, the call converted 79% of the time. When the sales skills were between 0 and 29, calls converted 16% of the time. So you can see the impact that sales skills have on conversion rate. It's dramatic. So each call, as I said, is scored between 0 and 100 for agent sales skills. It's a composite indicator of every possible sales skill. There's like 20 we track, and this just kind of throws them together in one. When sales skills are between 90 and 100, calls convert at 79%. When they're between 0 and 29, calls convert 16% of the time. Dramatic stuff. Lead quality. Lead quality also matters. So again, we score every lead between 0 and 100. When a lead scored between 90 and 100, calls converted 65% of the time. Calls with a lead score between 0 and 29 converted only 9% of the time. So what this means, obviously, is that the better the lead, the higher the conversion rate. The more likely the caller is to close and become a conversion. So let's talk about questions, what are the elements of a lead score? Like, how do we figure out whether a lead was good or bad? Well, first of all, it's if they're asking questions, if they're interested in the product. Second is that they're willing to provide some information. So if they say, yeah, my name is this, that's a better lead than if a person says, is not willing to give their name. Finally, are they interested? Based on the words and phrases said on the call, based on the tone of the person's voice, we can tell if the person was interested. And then are they pricing sensitive? If someone is way pricing sensitive, they're probably not a very good lead. And our system takes away points for that and deducts points for that. And then this is sort of those were 6. We said we'd give you 6. I'll give you 8 because I'm just that kind of a guy. Bonus, asking for the business. You can see here again, if the person, if the agent asks for the business and we're certain of it, which means they got about a 90 or above. So our system is absolutely certain that they asked for the business. The call closed 82% of the time. That's insane. If we're not sure they asked for the business or they did it in a passive way, conversion rates are only 25%. So suddenly you have these very simple things that are adding up to massive increases in conversion rate. And then finally, length. This is important in the industry. Calls that are over 10 minutes convert 7.6 times more often than calls that are only 1 minute long. And you can see actually there's a pretty big increase when calls get about 2.5 minutes. So you can see that it jumps up obviously from 61 or from 30 to 60 to 61 to 90. But you can also see another pretty substantial drop, or increase when it goes about over 2 minutes. So long story short, on both of these pieces of data here, longer calls matter. Now, is this a causal relationship? Like, should you just keep somebody on the phone because eventually they'll buy if you just wear them down? No, probably not. But there is something to be said for increasing the length of your phone conversations, asking the person questions. They feel more comfortable. They're more likely to buy. And all of that has to do with the length of the phone call. Let's talk about a couple use cases very briefly. So these are the ways clients are using this now. So we have clients, as I said, that are receiving alerts for missed opportunities. They're receiving lists of missed opportunities from our system. We're also able to send lead scores to your affiliate management systems and or your CRMs. So if you want to fix a lead score, 97 was this person's lead score, next to their record or in their record, we can do that. We can also track conversion rates for campaigns, for ads, for keyword groups, and even for specific agents in your call centers or your locations. As I said, we can track the sales skills. We do that for clients. We have within our tool, we have a webhook generator. And if you're familiar with webhooks or you're not familiar with webhooks, basically what they allow you to do is they allow you to send data proactively to any third-party SaaS that has an API. So you can literally push any data from our system to any SaaS that you're using. So if you want to see pricing sensitivity of every single caller, if you want to see the call recording itself within another system, if you want to see whether or not the caller was a good lead or a bad lead within your system, all of that data can be pushed proactively into whatever system you're using. Of course, most of our clients are using this for two purposes, to optimize their campaigns and to improve their sales processes. And then, of course, in the affiliate space, we have clients that are using this to pay affiliates based on good calls and bad calls, or having affiliates that are using this to charge their lead buyers for good calls versus bad calls. So let's talk about conversation analytics. I want you to answer a couple quick questions to give me a sense. So let's see. How would your company use conversation analytics? And there's probably more than one of these that you could answer, but please only pick the one that you are most excited about. Lead scoring to optimize campaigns, to measure the sales skills of agents, to gather missed opportunity data and capture lost revenue, or to track conversion rates to evaluate campaigns and sales teams. So please answer the question there. And looks like we've got about 40% of you that have answered so far. Let's get that up a little higher. So please answer the question, everybody. Let's go for about 20 more seconds. All right. It looks like about 70% of you have voted. I'll close the campaign and share the results. So it looks like the majority of you would use conversion rates to evaluate your campaigns as well as your sales teams. Second is to measure sales skills of agents. Third is to gather missed opportunity data and capture lost revenue. And then fourth is lead scoring to optimize campaigns. Again, I would agree. I think conversion rates are probably the most compelling piece of data. I think missed opportunities are probably the most useful on a day-to-day basis, but to see conversion rates is extremely compelling. So that's interesting. And then finally, let's answer this question. There's one more to answer. What's your biggest question about conversation analytics? You saw the data it can produce. So is your biggest question, does it work? How does it work? C, what's the cost? D, I'm not sure how I would use it. Or E, I don't have any questions. Sign me up. That would be cool if you said that. That'd be super cool. Usually people don't say that because it's a pretty complex tool. But if you do think that, then that's awesome. Okay, we've got about 40% of you that have voted. Let's wait till we get up to about 60%, and we'll close the poll about 20 more seconds. About 20 more seconds. All right. Thanks for answering those polls. That's the last poll. So thank you for doing that. I think it helps with participation, to have these polls. So I appreciate you doing that. So let me show you the results. So 10% say, does it work? 20% ask, how does it work? 45% say, what's the cost? 20% say, I'm not sure how I would use it. And it looks like a couple of people said, I don't have any questions. Sign me up. All right, we will. We will sign you up. So let's go through each of these real quick, and then we'll take your individual questions. If you type those into the question bar, we'll take any other questions you have. So does it work? The answer to that is yes. And here's a couple ways that I explain it. So our call accuracy rate is well above 90%, 93 or 4% actually. So we get the gist of the call right. And here's what I mean when I say gist. So our goal is not to tell you, we're going to miss some words, I guess is my point. Like, we're not going to transcribe everything correctly. but what we will do is get the gist of the call right. And here's what I mean. So if my wife were to call me right now and say, hey, bring some milk home after work, I would get the gist of that. I would know that I needed to grab milk on the way home. I, however, probably wouldn't be able to accurately transcribe every word of that phone call, probably because I'm human and I wasn't paying attention entirely to what she was saying. I just knew I needed to get milk. And second is, even if I was, I still wouldn't be able to do it all. And this system works in sort of a similar way, except it pays attention all the time. But basically the way it works is, of course, it's going to miss a word here and there, but it's going to get the gist of the phone call, which is all we need it to do to be extremely valuable. So yes, it does work very, very well. The other way to explain it is, we're all familiar with like Siri or Google Voice Search, where you say something. If you say like, look, I need to find, where's the nearest place I can buy a hamburger? And it's like, here's the nearest place you can buy a shirt. Well, that's stupid. The difference between Siri and what we're doing is, if Siri misses one word of a 6-word query, which is what the average Siri query is, they're in big trouble because that word might be really, really important. However, if we miss 8% of the words in a 700-word phone call, it doesn't really matter at all. We're still going to get the gist of the call, and we're still going to understand what happened. Second question is, how does it work? It's a speech recognition tool that we have built upon hundreds of thousands of algorithms. So it literally mines the call and looks for words and phrases that can tell us what happened on the phone call. So if it sees, the best example to use, if it hears 17 numbers in a row, followed by the phrase confirmation number, or preceded by the phrase confirmation number, we know that obviously a transaction took place. That's the easiest example. So it's principles like that we use. See, what's the cost? This is always the most common question. Our most baseline plan is $69 a month. That comes with 30 calls analyzed, as well as a couple call tracking numbers of 500 minutes. We have plans that are $199, $699, and then go up. So if you want to analyze millions of phone calls, that's great. We can do that. If you want to analyze just a few phone calls a month, you can get into a $69 plan or a $199 a month plan and have those calls analyzed, as well as get your basic call tracking features that you're used to. So really, really useful tool for the price. I hope that answers that question. I'm not sure how I would use it. As I said, we have clients that are getting missed opportunity notifications. They're getting lists of missed opportunities. They're scoring leads that are helping them optimize campaigns. They're scoring leads that are helping them determine which affiliates are producing good calls. They're actually analyzing the sales skills of their agents and able to determine which agents are doing well and which aren't in an automated way. So all over the map, I mean, honestly. And then, I don't have any questions, sign me up. Sweet. That's what we'll do. So that's my information. That's the phone number for our office here. You can see my email address. I'm the Director of Content and Communications. And thank you for being on our webinar today. So with that, we'll take any of your questions that you have.
All right, McKay. Yeah, we
take those questions.
Sure thing. Thanks very much. Great presentation. I really like the polls and the interactivity. That's a great way to keep us engaged. Not that you need any help, being a former TV man, where I was glued to every word. So one question we've got from Nerman is, do you have any examples of success so it is easier to pitch to existing clients to use it as well? So maybe any testimonials or sort of case studies or something like that. I know you showed a couple of slides like that, but would you have any resources like that available?
Yeah, we do. We have a lot of case studies, PDFs that you can send to clients. We could even, one of the things that we also offer is white labeling of our tool. So if you want clients to log into our tool and it looks like it's your tool with your branding, we offer that as well. So, and we even would allow you to co-brand or white label our collateral. So like any flyers or slides or presentations we have, like we could make those look like yours. We provide you those resources. So absolutely. We have a lot of clients that use it and have had really great success with it in a lot of different areas. The thing, the biggest trouble we have, honestly, is figuring out exactly which is the best market for it. Because as I said, there's use for it in the marketing world, there's use for it in the business intelligence world, there's use for it in the affiliate space. Because there's so much data about sales and business operations as well as marketing that you can pull. It just depends on how you want to use it. So really versatile is, I think, probably the best way to describe our tool.
Great. Well, thanks very much. Ed asks if the slides are going to be available, and I'll just make a quick note here that this presentation will be on RingPartner's YouTube channel, youtube.com/RingPartner, so you'll be able to view the presentation again. But McKay, will your slides be available?
Yeah, what we'll do is I will actually send out an email that has the recording attached to it. Then I can also actually add the slides as like a PDF.
Perfect.
So watch for an email from me tomorrow morning that has the recording as well as the slides on it.
Fantastic. All right. I hope that answers your question, Ed. Heather was very enthusiastic. She didn't have a question earlier. She did just say that she was a big fan of the presentation. But then she also asks this. Is there a way to extract when an agent is closing a sale and see what the most common phrases are used to make those sales? Good question.
That is a great question. Yes. So it depends on what you mean by common phrases. So if you mean specific words, like did they say today or tomorrow or absolutely or something like that, then no. But are we able to tell you, like, did this agent ask for the business? Was this agent polite? Did they have good phone etiquette? And did they use phrases that would indicate that those things happened? Yes. So we are able to tell you what phrases produce closes and whether the agent used those phrases. But if you want to know, like, did the agent say, you know, rooster on a phone call that would help them close, no, we aren't able at this point to tell you that.
Okay. I know the algorithm must be very sophisticated because I'm a bit of a journalist in a way, and I do these interviews with people, and I still haven't found a good speech-to-text program, so I can only imagine how sophisticated your guys' system must be to kind of track these kinds of things.
Yeah, it's pretty darn sophisticated. Our team spent a lot of time building it. But
right.
Yeah, it's a good tool that works well.
Fantastic. Jessica asks, in regards to RingPartner, how would I use tools such as missed opportunities or quality of the sales rep when I am an affiliate of the company?
Good question. So we integrate with a lot of different tools, including RingPartner. But I think the best way, excuse me, got a cough there. The best way and the most common way companies are using this is they are, in some cases, using numbers from our database and then routing those through RingPartner. And then they're able to get this data. Or in some cases, they're using other numbers that they have used, and they're able to get the data anyway through routing it through our system. So there are ways easily that we can get data out of, if you use RingPartner, that we can get data out. Or any other tool, like if you're using, if you have a certain CRM and you want to see data within your CRM, like we can make that work. So point being, yes, there are ways to get that data out. Whether you want to shoot it into like a separate dashboard, whether you want to log into LogMyCalls and see the data, whatever you want to do, it can happen.
Awesome. Chris has the next question. Chris asks, how long does it take and what is the turnaround between a call taking place and the results / analytics being made available?
That is a very good question. It depends. So during the height of our day, when we're processing millions of phone calls, it's going to take probably about 30 minutes. If someone calls you in the middle of the night, it's going to take 2 minutes. So it just depends on how bogged down the system is and how many calls are coming through. And we're constantly working. As anybody who knows how these sort of systems that sit on servers work, we sit on cloud-based servers, and so they automatically uptick or downtick their usage depending on how many people are using the tool and how many calls are coming through. Right. But it's honestly going to depend on usage. But my point is, you're going to have the data very quickly.
I was going to say 30 minutes seems like a very quick turnaround.
Oh, it's extremely quick, especially when you consider, I mean, just even tools like Google Analytics are a couple hours generally. The total numbers are kind of behind. So our tool works just as fast, if not faster, than any of those.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you for the question, Chris. Adrian asks, do you just support the English language?
Yes, we do.
Excellent. So any other, are there plans in place for any other languages, Spanish, French, anything like that?
Not at this point. Those will be, I'm sure, in our roadmap as we head down that road. But at this point, we're really focused on, the tool is so new even in the U.S. and Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a North American exclusive tool right now. And the reason for that isn't so much the languages, it's actually the difficulty of getting overseas phone numbers. So it's much more challenging to get phone numbers in other countries with some of their telephony restrictions than it is in the U.S. and Canada.
I feel like that'll get better. I mean, pay-per-call is still relatively new. With same with RingPartner, where we don't have a ton of international campaigns simply because of the problem you mentioned. But I feel that will not necessarily fix itself, but that will be sort of a source of problem solving as the years go on and pay-per-call becomes more of a global dominant force, etc.
Agreed.
It's the same with us. We like to focus more on English calls. But Adrian, thank you for the question. It's on our minds for sure. Jessica has another question. Sorry, beg your pardon. Does LogMyCalls track Bing ads, and does it analyze ad groups or individual keywords?
Yes. So to the first question, does LogMyCalls track Bing ads? Yes, it can track any ad source. So basically the way that works is if you come to LogMyCalls, so the example I'll use, if you come to LogMyCalls.com and you came from a retargeting ad, so we use the Google Display Network. If you come from one of our retargeting ads, you're going to see a certain phone number. So there's a couple ways to do this. Let me back up. If you come from a certain ad, you'll see a certain phone number on our landing page. If you come from a different ad, you'll see a different phone number on the same page. So the number dynamically generates and temporarily displays a unique phone number dependent upon how the source reached that page. So an organic searcher is going to see a different number than someone who clicked through from a Bing ad. And that Bing searcher is going to see a different number than someone who clicked through from a Google ad.
Right.
That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is what's called session-based or keyword-based dynamic number insertion. So that means literally every single visitor, regardless of their source, would see a different phone number. Every single visitor would see a different unique phone number that would automatically and temporarily display. So yes is the answer to that first question. It does track Bing ads. So you can see not only does Bing generated this many compared to Google, you can see this Bing ad generated this number of phone calls. This many people saw the phone number. This many people called the phone number. This many people converted from that phone number. Pretty useful.
Very useful.
And second question is, does it analyze ad groups or individual keywords? We pull in as much data as Google passes and Bing passes. Obviously, Google specifically, excuse me. Obviously, Google limited dramatically the organic stuff you can get about a year ago. But, yeah, we push as much data as we can through that Google allows. So I hope that answers your question, Jessica.
Excellent. We got guys. Keep questions coming. We've got one more from Steve. Steve asks, how do you connect to an outbound campaign?
Steve, let me clarify this. What do you mean by outbound campaigns? Like outbound phone calling campaigns? So like you've got a team that's going to dial, make a bunch of phone calls from some list you've got. Is that what you're asking, Steve? Okay. He says yes.
Yeah.
So there's a couple ways that our tool would be useful for that. The first thing is obviously it wouldn't be useful from a call tracking perspective because they're not calling you, so that marketing data is not useful. However, it would be useful to use conversation analytics and extract sales and marketing data from the call itself. So it would be used in the same way. There'd be a couple ways we could get the calls. The first way is if you're using some sort of an outbound dialer or call recording system now, we need to see if those call recordings meet our qualifications because we demand very high quality recordings to make our system work as optimally as it can. So the first thing would be to obviously make sure that the system you're using, the recording system, is recording at a high enough level that we can use. If it is, we can pump those calls through our system and you can get this data. And it's very simple. It's all done via API and it's easy. The second way we could do it is we actually have some clients who use our tool to actually make outbound calls. So it's not a dialer, but what they would simply do is they have an outbound number. So if they're making a low number of calls, this wouldn't work with you couldn't integrate it into like a power dialer unless that recorder is recording your calls. But if you're making a few outbound calls, you simply just need to dial like a 9 or something before you make the phone call, and it would analyze those calls depending on whatever parameters you want. So it would work. the simplest way to do it is if you're using a tool that records calls, we just need to get those calls in our system via the API, which is very easily done.
Very cool. McKay, I had a question, if that's all right with everybody. In terms of statistics, I'm in love with statistics. I'm obsessed with them when it comes to sports or my own habits or anything like that. And I see a lot of really cool points, like how great call to good call in Q2 decreased and things like that. How dependent are the statistics on each other? And by that I mean when you look at a statistic like 21% of calls in Q2 were established as good, can you sort of see trends based on what they were in Q1 or Q3? Does it sort of help paint a very broad picture as opposed to just looking at them through a megascope or a microscope, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. So like conversion rate is sort of an interesting case and point of what you're talking about. So we analyzed calls in Q1, in Q2, and in Q3, and in all 3 quarters, the conversion rate was identical, which tells us that our data is really quite good at this point.
Right.
That it's not deviating, even though we're adding clients in various industries, that number is staying exactly the same.
Wow.
So that shows you it's pretty darn stable. Now we have other things where the missed opportunity percentage went up from Q1 to Q2. So it was like 46% in Q1, 56% in Q2. So that could be a number of things. It could be that we had a client, a large client, who changed the way that they were handling calls, and that dramatically altered our numbers. Or it could be that we had a bunch of different industries come in that have a higher missed opportunity rate.
Right.
Don't know the answer to that yet, but yes, I think it's very important to look at it in context and not just see it with blinders on.
Yeah.
Because that's going to give you really, and here's the other interesting. We are finding that a lot of the causal factors that I showed you at the end there, if our system is confident that you ask for the business, 82% of the calls close. That is remaining very constant. So it's really interesting to see which data points are remaining constant now over 3 quarters of this product and those that are changing slightly.
Fascinating. It's really, really cool. I'll be addicted to your site if I'm not careful. Jessica asks, what cost would 200 to 500 calls a month be?
So 200 to 500 calls analyzed. Let me drag the pricing metrics onto the screen here. I'll just show you. We don't have no secrets. So here's our pricing. Hope you can see it on your screen there. Actually, no, you can't. I did not hide the poll. Sorry. So you can see this is our pricing. You see our $69 a month plan comes with 5 users. That means the number of people that can log in. 1 tracking number that can be local or toll-free. Comes with all these things. And then comes with 30 analyzed calls. 500 minutes as well. Performance, which is a $199 package, comes with 10 tracking numbers, 1,000 minutes, and 200 analyzed calls. And then value, $699, comes with 100 tracking numbers, 100 minutes a number, so 10,000 minutes, and 500 calls analyzed. So it's going to depend on what you want. And then we have plans that go up from there for volume, massive volume. We've got some clients that we're analyzing, 30,000 calls in a given week for. So it just depends on what they want and what you want as a. And then with each of these, of course, additional calls analyzed. There's a price. There's additional numbers. There's you can go above these needs if you need to. So I hope that answers your question, Jessica. So for 200 to 500, I mean, you could get either of these plans. This is going to do 200. The performance, the value is going to provide 500. So yeah, that's depending on your business operation. If you think about what a missed opportunity, just even capturing 1 or 2 missed opportunities a month would be, that alone, forget the other data, which is awesome, that alone is going to pay for this probably 2 or 3-fold is my guess.
Fantastic. All right. Well, that looks like the end of the questions. McKay, did you want to say anything before we sign off?
No, I just appreciate everybody's time. We had a really good crowd today, and I appreciate you taking the time, Henry. I hope Mike feels better and he can get back in the saddle, but you did an admirable job in his absence.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Well, I appreciate everybody, like McKay said. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. McKay, thank you for coming on board. RingPartner, obviously, big fans of LogMyCalls. This webinar will be made available on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/RingPartner. As well, please follow us on Twitter @RingPartner. And I hope everybody has a great day, and thanks very much for joining us. Talk to you soon.